I don't know whether you know that, first of all, the terrorism in the Near East was invented and started by the Zionists. One of the worst terrorists ever was this Abraham Stern of the Stern Group, of the Stern Gang, it was called in Holland, the Stern Gang. He was a murderer of, or they were the murderer of Lord Moyne and of Count Bernadotte and the perpetrators in Deir Yasin. But also I should want that you know that on January 1931, this Abraham Stern, a very learned man, but a very wicked man, a very bad man, he wrote to the Hitler's Reichsregierung, and he offered the Irgun troops to fight side by side with Hitler. This Zionist wanted to fight side by side with Hitler against the British. There you have the Zionists. Now we are at the center of our problem. Okay. So now we come to the so-called theme for tonight, that is the misuse of the Holocaust. And this man with this nice face, that is Prime Minister Netanyahu, he looks like he is like a murderer. And just as a sideline, the most cruel generals and the most cruel politicians in Israel use still their baby names. His name is Bibi or Baby Netanyahu, little Netanyahu, the greatest, one of the greatest criminals ever. Okay. And they exploit the memory of those lost, those who were murdered. And why is that? Because those murdered, just like the US, most Jews before the World War I, had a very high ethics. And they knew all these, or nearly all, who were murdered. In Central Europe, the Jews were mostly reformed, and just like in the United States. And they knew that no injustice ever experienced can be undone by any new injustice, and certainly not if that injustice is done to people who have nothing whatsoever to do with the Nazi crimes. Then this nice man there, he had the chutzpah, we would say in Yiddish, to address the United Nations and use the number I have on my arm to tell them that it's time to throw an atom bomb on Iran. Their disdain for us was enforced by a myth that we just went to the camps like sheep to the slaughter. I couldn't stand here because 10 months, I survived 10 months. Why? Because before I was underground, but there was unfortunately also in Holland much treason, and so I was a victim of that, and so they caught me in April '43. But I just could survive 10 months, and so I didn't go. And all those who still can testify about Auschwitz nowadays, they couldn't survive much longer than that. And so they all first had done other things, and to fight against the Germans and evade. And finally, the victims were Jews and not Zionists. Was humanitarian, universalist, and it's the line in the Torah which talks about this universalist humanitarian attitude is Leviticus 19:34, and it says that the foreigner who dwelleth amongst you, you should treat like if you were born amongst you. Love thou neighbor, he is like you, because also you were a foreigner in Egypt. That is Jewish ethics, and also Christian ethics, obviously, because the first Reform rabbi, and I tested this thing, what I now say, with many clergymen, the first Reform rabbi of Judaism was Rabbi Joshua ben Yosef from Nazareth, Jesus. And that is paraphrased, this Leviticus 19, later by Rabbi Hillel, who, and when I was a young kid in Germany, I was educated with this rule, the golden rule of Hillel: what thou not willst, what thou hast done, don't do to others. Unfortunately for the Jews, I think in this case, and for those who so gladly now are against Muslims and say we have a Christian, Judeo-Christian culture, I must disappoint them, because what Hillel said was literally said 500 years before him by Confucius, the Chinese. So in contrast to what I now said about Judaism, political Zionism is the absolute, the contrary. It is colonialist, it is racist, it is separatist, and it is definitely and intrinsically and from the start genocidal. It is based on the book Joshua, where according to the story, the Jews how do you do it? Conquer Canaan, and God, according to those stories, which I said completely contrary to the nucleus of Judaistic ethics, God is angry because there is somebody who still has some empathy and wants to let a little baby live, and then God is angry with him because that little baby would grow up and would bring the Jews into danger later. So, unfortunately, and that is the basis that has with the Judaism, which normal people, normal Jews who live in Canada or in the United States are not Zionists, are grown up with, and it is contrary to the Zionistic terrible thing. Why? How could Zionists come about? Unfortunately, it is around 1900. There was virulent European anti-Semitism, and now I come to the third speaker, or to the other, my other colleague, Alan, who talked about new anti-Semitism. That is absolutely, why don't you, I mean, in the medievals they talked about how many angels can dance on the spire of a church. There is no new anti-Semitism, because anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism was always used against the group without any political power whatsoever, let alone with an atomic bomb in their trousers. And so, and so, the Jews were completely without any answer to the anti-Semitism, besides trying to learn a lot, besides trying to be honest, most of them in the Western countries, in any case. So there is no new anti-Semitism. There is a myth, because you can't use the word which was used for centuries, or for thousands years, about 1,000 years, about the group who was completely without any weapon. You can reuse that word, not with the people with the atomic bomb in their pocket. Well, okay. So now, at the turn of the century, of the 19th to the 20th century, of the 18th to 19th. So the 19th to 20th century, there was due to the emancipation of the Jews in Europe, which was started by Napoleon, the French, so by the French General Napoleon, who became later Emperor Napoleon. The French brought the emancipation to Europe, so Jews could, after him, he conquered large parts of Europe, and Jews after him could have other professions. They could be lawyers and doctors and what have you. And because there was also still a lot of anti-Semitism also in France, despite the Enlightenment, some anti-Semites forged papers to show that Captain Dreyfus was a traitor and was a spy for Prussia. And that was eventually was discovered by the famous French writer Zola, who wrote the famous article "J'accuse, I accuse," etc. But Herzl was at the process he was a very assimilated Jew without much knowledge about Judaism, but he was appalled. He was just a modern man. Unfortunately, his modern ideas involved also the bad modern ideas like colonialism, racism, and nation state. That's why Zionism was fought. But however, he was rightly appalled and had the cranky idea, absolutely cranky idea, that if the Jews had a state of their own, anti-Semitism must disappear like snow under the sun. Nothing can be less true than that. And certainly the three here in the hall who come from Holland know very well that after the Second World War there were big pogroms in Indonesia, which was still then a Dutch colony, and against Chinese traders. Would you think that the already then mighty Chinese would come to help their brethren in Indonesia? No way. So it's all crap. Wrong theory and a bad theory and a very, very... But what makes things worse, because Zionism is contrary to Jewish ethics, Judaism had, especially in Israel, and in all the organizations everywhere in the world which are so-called Jewish church or organizations, but which are in fact cover-up organizations for Zionists, had to be supplanted by the Holocaust religion. And the Holocaust religion is as much opposed, contrary to Judaism, because Judaism has no dogmas. Judaism has the Bible, that's it, but there are no dogmas. But Holocaust religion, nothing what is done to others may ever be compared to the Auschwitz experience. In other words, everything we, the Zionists, do to Palestinians is a trifle as compared to what we poor people had to suffer. And lastly, and again, the blasphemy of unheard dimension, in my opinion, the only thing, he says, he wrote and said, the only thing which Auschwitz can be compared to is the Sinai experience. And I don't know how well you know what that is. On Sinai, Moses, the prophet of Judaism, was called up to the mountain by God himself, and God gave him with his own hands there the Ten Commandments, which are the basic of so-called Judeo-Christian ethics. And for Wiesel, Auschwitz is comparable, and so that supplants now Moshe on the mountain with God. Okay, so you see how crazy it is, but unfortunately, many people in Israel and elsewhere are adherent. Look, my interpretation of Auschwitz is completely different. I know that, first of all, there is the empathy, so being with people, so trying to soothe pains and suffering of people who suffer is absolutely human, and more than human. It is now new studies have proven that it is also with mammals and even other animals. They help each other in order to diminish suffering. And that means that has a very strange corollary. That if a majority, like the Nazis with the Jews, or I'm afraid like the Israelis with the Palestinians, wants to inflict suffering on a minority, that can only, suffering, and especially wants to dehumanize the minority, which they tried with me too. They didn't succeed, I hope. It's your judgment, but I think they didn't succeed. But who tried to dehumanize me, and I saw the faces in the behavior of these people who tried to do that. And I tell you, the Israeli soldiers who try to not let a pregnant Palestinian woman go to the hospital for getting her birth, they are completely dehumanized. So any majority who wants to dehumanize a minority group must first be dehumanized itself by brainwashing from kindergarten until inclusive the army. And that's what is happening in Israel. And this is one of the words of hope I can give you, because eventually I am convinced that a society where a majority of the people, and if you talk to people who know Israel from 40, 50 years back, who revisit old acquaintances or friends of them, they come back shocked because they are so changed. They have lost most of them have lost their humanity and don't want to hear about the Palestinians. They are the suffering ones. And what I want to say is, no society where a majority is dehumanized can long be stable, because it will destroy itself. And that is the only hope I can give you tonight. What is important is the following. Most people who write about the Hitler era, which lasted only for 12 years, I want you to remember that only 12 years, the Israel indoctrination lasts 62 years. It's more than 5 times as long. 12 years is half a generation. So it's a very hopeless case. But many people who write about Hitler era identify it immediately with the gas chambers. And I have written one of my books, is unfortunately it's in German, but it is about historic forces and how the Holocaust came about. And I studied quite a bit of literature for it, and it is well known in those who are familiar with the subject that before June 1941, there was never other plans than mass deportation of Jews of Europe to unkind places, like first Madagascar, where it's tropical and bad illnesses, and then when that was impossible because the Germans didn't take care of the British fleet as they wanted, so they couldn't transport people from Europe to Madagascar. And then they hoped in the beginning with their Russian activity, they advanced fast, and they hoped to be able to reach the gulags, which were empty by that time, or nearly empty. But they couldn't, and so therefore then they only started to plan industrialized murder. But even so, they knew that because, for instance, the German Jews, like my father, I mean, they served in the army in the German army in World War I, and he was a soldier at the Eastern Front and was wounded and became ill and eventually he died from that. But whatever, at least after being deported to the Regenstadt. But whatever, there were many Germans who were not anti-Semitic. That is, I know the Canada. I don't know it all. I have been often in the U.S. I remember when I came in the 50s, when I worked for Philips. When I came to the U.S., there were hotels where Jews were not allowed. That was so. In that respect, Germany was the United States was certainly about as anti-Semitic as Germany before Hitler, if not more. That I can't judge. But in any case, so the Germans were afraid that if the non-Jewish Germans would see mass deportations, they would rebel. And so therefore there was a very good preparation where of years between 33 and 41, where the dehumanization in propaganda and in the news of the Jews were systematically performed. So systematic discrimination, dehumanization, then different laws for Jews and Aryans, arrest without warrant, indoctrination through propaganda, school books, comparison with insects, bacteria, and cancer, and especially also new restrictions of nearly all professions again closed, so that they would impoverish and so go by themselves, or be even more despicable, because if you are poor and not cared for, you are not liked very much. And if we then now compare that with what happens in Palestine and in the occupied territories, they prepare for mass deportation. The other day, this terrible Dutch anti-Islam chap, Wilders, who is a personal friend of this even more terrible Lieberman, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Israel. They had a talk in our paper. It was very extensively. This talk was described, and Lieberman said, "Look, don't worry, we can take care of them because Palestine is already there. It's Jordan, so we only need buses, and then there they go to Palestine." So that is, and that is absolutely is long known. Already 2 or 3 years ago, there was a big warning by professors, Jewish professors from Israel, who said we are preparing for mass deportation, and we should be careful. Okay, so that is very similar to what the Nazis did with the Jews. The only thing which will not happen is indeed gas chambers. We'll do it. And I want to say, then I come to my last slide. Shulamit Aloni, who was a minister of education in Israel some years ago, or many years ago, wrote an article in Haaretz under the title, "We don't need to have gas chambers to commit genocide." And I said before to her already that I think even making it impossible or very difficult to get an education is a slow form of genocide, let alone mass deportation or what have you. So that is, everything of this sort is genocide. Okay, my final conclusion now. Modern enlightened Judaism developed in 19th and early 20th century and spread over mid-Europe and the US is humanist and universal. Political Zionism is the opposite. It has only one single aim, and political Zionism is the politics which, in the name of Zionism, is performed by the Israeli politicians every day. And that single aim is this: maximum of soil, of surface in Palestine, with no Palestinians on it. All the rest about peace is only there to throw you all sand into your eyes, so that you get the impression that there is still some hope. I don't, besides the hope I gave you, I don't think there is any hope. This peace process is one big eyewash, nothing else, nothing else. And and I'm afraid that U.S. and US and Europe play a very bad role in this too. I don't know about Canada.
Worse.
And political Zionism is the opposite, is nationalistic, exclusive, colonialist and racist, and I forget this second hope I have. I don't know whether you are aware that the other day, a few weeks ago, Netanyahu spoke in the United States. And he said to the crowd around him, you try to delegitimize Israel. And then there were young Jews with banners, and they said, which had texts like, "We are not delegitimizing Israel. Israel is, by its crimes against humanity, by its crimes against international law, is delegitimizing itself every day." And that is, again, hope. Thank you.